I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here finally. Wow. What a morning. How is everyone doing? Everyone doing okay? On. Yes. Don't start this shit. Hey, Pixie. Now, I finally got things working. Barely. Okay. Google and I have apparently been on an entire date for the past hour trying to get everything synced up, blown up, checked in. When you got 4 devices, it's kind of hard and it just doesn't want to cooperate. Oh, heck no. Let's not do that today. Okay, there. This is just crazy, y'all. I'm just crazy. There we go. Booyah. The Playgrounds, Book 2. Pebbles, I am so glad you're here today. And you just never get to come and join us, and I'm loving it. I'm eating my toast too, by the way, because I haven't had breakfast today and it's 1 o'clock. Mm. Vinci, I was going to do you some music, but I'll just do my noise box and we'll just go with that for now. Because I think I need some relaxation. Okay. Y'all about ready to get started? Woo-hoo. Come on in, Sarah. Come on in and sit a spell, sister. All right. All right, y'all. Let's see if I can find this fine, sexy cover here. Came in here to edit this morning, do some editing, and it wouldn't pull anything up. I was like, what the crap? So I did a thing on my computer over there, and my extender needed to be rebooted or something. It was crazy. Okay. Here we go. Here's the book cover. The Will to Serve. You guys remember, Pixie's the one that does a pull that down so you guys quit looking at the top of my head. Look at my boobies. See? Coffee, nap, repeat. Nope. Coffee, nap, sparkle, repeat. We all know I have to sparkle. Okay, so there was a release party for this today or yesterday, something like that. I don't even know. It says available January 5th. So, Pixie, I'll let you and yours do your thing. You can tell us where to find it, how much it is, and all that when it comes out, whatever, yesterday. Okay, good. This one says January 5th, so I wasn't sure. Alrighty, so let's get this party rolling. Everybody got their hot flash kits? I forgot my toy. It's in there. Dang. I ain't getting up to go get it though, so y'all are just gonna have to deal with it. All right, chapter 1. It was inevitable. Why do you guys use these words? Do you use these words in real life? It was inevitable. They had teased each other all day with text back and forth that whetted each other's appetite. You guys remember this is book 2 in the Playground series. The Playgrounds is a place for people to go and enjoy BDSM at a resort. So, people are stupid. Okay, so, um, they had teased each other all day with text back and forth that whetted each other's appetite, but not enough. Never enough. How many times did she zone out at work with blank stares and thoughts of things he would do? The anticipation throughout the book was throughout the day was excruciating, but in some ways, the drive back to his place was worse. And if you remember, hey Jen, and she acquired a Dawn, but it was on a time limit, if I'm correct, right, Pixie? Um, Silence filled the car so much that at first she feared she had crossed some line and it would punishment, not pleasure, that awaited. But a tiny, barely perceptible, steady increase in speed gave her the courage to steal small glances at him. The tightened jaw, the intense focus on the road, the grip on the wheel. Her breathing hitched. The signs were easy to miss, but she had known him for a long time, and now she wondered if she had pushed him too far in other ways. Well, too far was one way of putting it. As soon as they stepped through the threshold of his apartment, he was on her. He pinned her to the door with one large hand holding both of her tiny wrists above her head. A button had flown off somewhere, her skirt half ripped open in haste to expose the bare skin. Skin that he proceeded to first bite, hard enough to mark. Then came the lazy licks as his control exerted itself once more. He swept his tongue across to ease the pulsing pain. She squirmed and moaned as he nibbled with his lips and the occasional graze of his teeth down along the edge of her bra. But that was all. It was all teasing, drawing out the anticipation. Almost against her will, she thrust her hips forward in an attempt to seek some relief as she ground against him and tried to entice him for more. If perchance you guys, because I can see it on the reflection of my TV, if you see anything flying around up here, I've got a bird feeder right here. Well, I have several bird feeders right here over my head and outside my window. So the birds are going crazy out there today. And I love how this thing makes me look so much bigger than I am, especially my boobs. My boobs are nowhere close to that big. They're just droopy. Okay. A groan of frustration spilled from her, and he smiled against her skin in response. She shifted her weight to try another tactic, sliding her leg up, rubbing her inner thigh along his hip while she mentally cursed the layers of clothing in between that undermined the effectiveness of the move. Eager, aren't we? She flushed and squirmed again as he glided his free hand down her side and hooked it underneath her thigh. Hold on, he commanded, startled her. His command startled her a little, but her body obeyed before she could register his words. Hazy fog clouded her mind. As he released her hands, she wrapped her arms around his neck and swung her other leg up, marveling still at how easily he could pick her up. She buried her face against the crook of his neck and inhaled his scent with faint with apple and cinnamon. The man had been baking again. Sweets, however, were very far from her mind at the moment. It didn't take long before she felt the softness of his bed against her rear. She settled and released her legs to let them drape with languid grace over the bed. But she remained reluctant to let go and kept her arms around his neck. Sweetheart. That was all it took. With a soft sigh, she released her grip and leaned back on her elbows, while her gaze followed his every move as he straightened. With a boyish, crooked grin, he undid one button, then another, until his white shirt parted to reveal the lines of toned muscles beneath it. In her head, she cursed the man's ability to frame himself in the best light, always tempting her. She already knew she could never deny him anything, but when he was in that mood, she was helpless against his whims, and they both knew it. He chuckled as he leaned forward and smoothed the pad of his thumb over her lower lip. No biting yourself. That's my job. She trembled once more at his touch, but released her teeth's hold. When did I start chewing on my lips? Before she could formulate half a reply, he covered her mouth with his, kissing her with the softest touch that began to deepen her groan. He slid the remains of her shirt off her shoulders, then splayed his fingers across one breast to stroke the lace. The movement drew louder moans from her. She reclined, and he chased her with more kisses until at last she lay on her back. He broke their contact then, and as he hovered over her, he smiled smug. So pretty, all spread out for me. His words always made her cheeks flush, even as they heightened the pleasure within. He tugged one bra cup down with his fingertips, then ceased his movements to watch as her chest rose with a deeper inhale. Love? She asked, hesitant at his pause. When he looked up in response, her breath caught. The intensity and focus he looked at her with was almost dizzying. They held each other's gaze for moments longer, with only the sounds of their breathing filling the silence, his slow and measured, hers struggling to match. She was the first to look away, a sudden shyness overcoming her earlier lust-driven bravado. A slight incline of her head and a lowering of her eyes showed her submission, but it seemed that he was in no mood for such gestures, for he slid one finger under her chin and guided her head back up. Don't. It pleases me to see your eyes. It pleases me? Those words were a trigger. She dared not look away again, lest the gesture end the night before it fully began. She would please him. She wanted to please him. He eased back and rebalanced himself. His grace always awed her, but there was nothing feminine in each movement. Precise, decisive. They spoke of a well-honed hunter, and unbeknownst to her at the time, she had been his prey since the first fateful night. He slid his hands down her arms, trailing heat down her skin from his fingertips. When he reached her breast, he led them up above her head. We will play a game tonight. Hmm. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know if mine, but Pixie says she's not having any problems. Lori! Okay. Hey, Jackie. You're late. But I ain't got to the good part yet. I'm there, but I'm in the middle of it, but you ain't missed anything just yet. Okay. I don't know what to do about the freezing. It will clear up when it's replayed. It doesn't freeze during the replay, so that's all I know to do. As long as Pixie's happy, I don't care about the rest of you. Pixie's the important one here today. It's all that reading we've been doing this weekend, sister. I feel like I got hair on my eyes. Okay. Her breathing grew shallow, although she managed to refocus her thoughts. They had discussed it before, how her brain could not disengage from the daily rat race. It took a man like him to hold her undivided attention in both mind, body, and mind, and he did so by challenging her at every turn. Tonight, he tightened his grip around her wrist. I will not bind you, and no rope will constrain you. Sorry, Pebbles, but you will keep your arms up right there, no matter what I do to your body. With a last squeeze, he let go of her wrist and trailed the backs of his hands all the way down. You will want to touch. He brushed one finger by one exposed nipple. You will want to pull me close. He replaced his finger with his tongue and swept it across, drawing a loud gasp from her. But even as she arched upward and begged with her body for more, he withdrew again. But you will keep those hands where they are, for no reason other than knowing it will please me. She whimpered, the cold air hardening her nipples further. Heat pulled in her center. Her gaze stayed on him, and she watched as he released her other breast while his eyes darkened. She wanted to pull him down so her body covered her own, wanted the touch of his lips on her, wanted him to lose control and thrust deep into her. Instead, she flushed and squirmed under his scrutiny. So taut and perky. He tugged her skirt down and a low moan escaped his lips, even as he pressed his fingers against her already soaked panties. So hot and wet. Oh, wait. So hot and wet for me. You can always see us on here, Teddy. Came out yesterday, Jackie. And Pebbles, I do know you so well. Okay. So taut and perky. He tugged her skirt down, and a low moan escaped his lips, even as he pressed his fingers against her already soaked panties. So hot and wet for me. All of you. The words came out as a bare whisper, her voice husky with need. He shifted his hands and tucked them under her rear, stroking her lace covered cheeks. An unbidden smile tugged at the corner of her lips as he groaned. Good girl. Coming from anyone else, she would have fought back tooth and nail against those words and thrown them back in their face with fire and fury. She had worked too hard in the world of men for anyone to patronize her with such a simple phrase. But here in the safe space with the man who she knew, respected, and thought the world of her, she glowed with pride from his approval. Lift your hips, little one. I want to unwrap my present. Without hesitation, she pushed her hips up and felt more than saw him tug her panties down with deft fingers. She strained to keep him in her view, but it was near impossible without breaking her arm's position. When he next resurfaced, There was the smirk and hint of mischief in his dark eyes before he tucked the undergarment into his back pocket. You owe me new panties. She'd, oh, You owe me new panties. She'd meant for the tone to be flat, even deadpan, but it came out more like a squeal, and she cursed herself for how weak she was against him. He chuckled and leaned forward once more. The heat and hardness of him bumped up against one bare thigh, and she shivered. That she had this kind of effect on him always delighted her. Rather than a reply, though, he reclaimed her lips with his, even as he cupped her breast. He took his time to massage it while he circled his thumb over one nipple, rolling it back and forth. It sent a shot of heat to her groin, and she bucked upward against him. Patience, sweetheart, he murmured as he withdrew as if to calm her eagerness. She whimpered and almost moved her hands to pull him back, only to remember their game at the last second. Please, she whispered and heard his dark chuckle once more, the sound holding wicked promises. A new gush of wetness soaked her thighs. Gosh, and he had barely touched her. Please, he teased. She widened her eyes as she watched him sink lower to settle on the floor. She raised herself, licking her dry lips at the sight of him resting between her legs. There was nothing submissive about his posture, however. Every line, every movement, every expression spoke of dominance, of precisely who was in control. What would you like, sweetheart? He ran a hand up her leg and stroked along her inner thigh. Everything in her tensed, held still, lest he cease his hand's journey. Perhaps you, perhaps you want me to bring you to the edge. The breath of his words brushed against her skin, and she shivered. Tease you mercilessly until the only thought consuming you is the need for sweet release. A single kiss as he pressed his warm lips against her, or push you over, then keep you on the other side, making you come for me over and over until you cannot take it anymore. He scraped his teeth against her thigh, and she felt more than heard him inhale her scent. The juxtaposition of imagery he placed in her head with the physical teasing that had been building up all this time drew more whimpers from her. When he looked up once more to meet her gaze, she saw the desire mirrored in his expression. But how he liked to draw it out. Sometimes it made her want to tear her hair out in frustration. In this instance, she wanted nothing more than to pull his head to her sex so that his tongue and lips would give her the much needed release. Only sheer willpower and stubborn determination to follow his orders kept her hands above her head. Please, she tried again. Please, I need you. The words were no more than a whisper. Soon, little one, soon. Relax. His voice washed over her as he switched to kneading her inner thighs. She tried and slumped back to stare at the ceiling, her gaze becoming unfocused, her eyes half closing. The sharp edge of the heat eased back ever so slightly as she surrendered to his ministrations. Her mind drifted and her eyes moved as if they had their own will, lifting before she remembered their game. Her mind drifted and her hands moved as if they had their own will, lifting before she remembered their game. Next, he parted the folds of her labia, but before she could react, his tongue was on her, a broad sweep upward that ended with a flick of her clit. Her hips jumped as she snapped her eyes open. He chuckled and shifted his hands on them to position her to his liking. then stayed, applying just enough pressure to keep her there. Again, he eased back and pressed small butterfly kisses along her thighs instead. She let out a long moan with frustration weaving into the sound. She moved her hands once more, then stopped again, as if they'd tugged against bonds that only her mind could see. Bonds made of his words, his command, and her own desire to obey. He moved with tantalizing slowness until the light kisses hovered at her entrance. With the same agonizing pace, he worked his way around her folds with his tongue and drew out glorious shudders from her body, seemingly on purpose. He left her clit alone, knowing how sensitive she was. She zeroed in on his attention to her sex, to the warmth and pleasure that coursed through her body. Her nipples hardened in their yearning for more stimulation, and she clasped her hands as she fought her own body to stay in position. He built her up with every touch, every sweep of his tongue, layer upon layer of pleasure, until she was once more on edge. Somewhere she heard low, continuous moaning, punctuated by whispers of please, then realized the sound was coming from her. Then nothing. Her mind screamed in frustration and railed against her building climax before being ripped away with no warning. She whipped her head up as she strained to catch a glimpse of the reason for such cruelty, and he smirked, meeting her bewildered look. Please, please, what, sweetheart? He used one finger to stroke her heat, to keep her simmering. Her own slickness coated her thighs, and she was fairly sure she was soaking his hand. She flushed and whimpered. The spoken word had never been her forte, but he had been articulate, training her to be more articulate to her needs, to communicate more. Now he sat back and waited, clearly with all the patience in the world, as he kept toying with her, but never enough to push her over. Please let me come. The words were out staccato, punctuated by ragged breaths. Good answer. Come for me. He gave her clit a hard flick. That was all it took. She exploded and her body bucked against his hand as the orgasm ripped through her. Her every nerve was on fire, overwhelmed with pleasure as he continued to draw out her climax with expert fingers. Just as she felt herself coming down, she heard his command. Again. He replaced his fingers with his tongue and lashed almost cruelly against her oversensitive clit. He slipped two fingers inside her and crooked them to press against her G spot. She screamed, her entire body arching as she spasmed out of control. The orgasm even harder than the last. The intensity overwhelmed her mind and stripped her body down to nothing but that single moment of ecstasy. What felt like an eternity later, he withdrew his tongue, then his fingers. But he kept his hand where it was to cup her sex with a gentle touch. As he slid onto the bed, he smoothed her hair back with his free hand and pressed a kiss to her forehead. You're so beautiful. There was a reverence in his voice that shook her and touched something deep inside her soul. Everything felt floaty and surreal, and in a detached part of her brain, she noted that she had likely entered subspace, that special mental state of euphoria that submissives could achieve from an intense session. Come back to me, sweetheart. You did good. So good. She focused on his words, using them as her tether to find her way back. It took several minutes before her vision cleared and she gave a weak smile at the sight of his face, hovering close. His expression was like that of a cat that had just eaten a canary. There you are, little one. She didn't quite trust her voice yet. Instead, she swallowed. Out of nowhere, he produced a bottle of water and held its straw to her lips. Ever observant and sensitive to her needs, she sucked on it and took the water in slowly. He groaned and muttered to himself, maybe a straw was a mistake. The comment drew a giggle from her, and he chuckled in return. He set the water bottle aside, then blinked for a moment. She wasn't sure what had caught him by surprise until he reached up to touch her hands, which were still clinging together above her head. You can let go now. She blushed and worked her fingers loose, even as he stroked the back of her hand to encourage the release. As she pulled them apart at last, he took one, held it up to his lips, and pressed a kiss on her knuckles. Good job. What do I win? She asked with a cheeky grin, a sign to both of them that she was on the way to recovery. He grinned in reply. We'll see what the score is by the end of the night. We still have a way to go. Chapter 2. Y'all liking this? Let Pixie know how well you like it now. Luna Ware stared at the sea of emails on her screen and chewed on her lip as the phrase victim of your own success ran across her mind. The quicker and more efficiently she worked, the more they piled on her. She was already juggling 3 side of the desk projects while managing her own queue of content edits. And on top of that, she had agreed to back up a coworker while he went on vacation for his honeymoon. What was I thinking? With a small groan, she pushed back a lock of blonde hair, so light that it was almost silver. In the back of her mind, she could almost hear Jacob's disapproving voice. He never liked it when she overworked herself. The thought of her dominant brought a blush to her face, and she lifted in her seat, all too aware of the thong riding up her ass crack. She'd never been much of a lingerie person until she noticed how much it delighted him. And once she dipped her toe into the world of lacy underthings all those years ago, she'd been hooked. They made her feel sexy and much more confident in her body. Like a chain reaction, the thought of lingerie brought memories of the previous night, of the games he had played with her, and the pleasure they'd found in each other's bodies. Her cheeks heated further, and she clenched before she looked around to make sure no one had noticed her burning face. Thank God she'd had her own office. She needed to calm down before someone walked in. Rather than returning her attention to the computer screen, she studied the small space instead. Printouts of all sorts lined the gray office walls, ranging from company paraphernalia from past creatives from past projects to charts and diagrams that expounded on theories of good conversion writing. A huge whiteboard hung from one wall, full of scribbles of her ideas for various projects. A modest bookcase stood flush against one corner, laden with rows of notebooks and reference books on grammar and writing styles. The adjustable sit-stand desk she worked at was pushed up against the opposing wall with 2 large monitors perched on top. Sticky notes lining the bottom of the screens. She had worked hard to make the space her own, a home away from home. Her cell phone came alive with a buzz. The device's vibration sent it skittering across the desk and startled her out of her reverie. She always wants to say revere when I say that. Uh-oh, sounds like mine working in too. Oh, I had to change my leg position there. Okay. The device's vibration sent it skittering across the desk and startled her out of her reverie. She almost jumped out of her chair but kept her rear in her seat, just barely. Luna took a breath to steady herself, then picked up the phone to see the notification showing two messages. The first was from her friend Lainey, a well known female dominant in the community. She was the one who had introduced her to Jacob in the first place. Sort of. Luna owed Lainey a lot, and she had always been grateful. Lainey had taken one look at her during their first munch, a brunch meetup for the local kink community, and had taken her under her wing. Given how naive Luna had been at the time, she could have gotten into a lot of trouble had Lainey not acted as her guide and paired her with the gentle and experienced trainer that was Jacob. But as much as she loved Lainey as a friend, she delayed opening that message in favor of the second, the one from Jacob himself. She skimmed her fingers over the screen and, with a light touch, opened the message. Her heart pounded as she straightened, only to slump back in her seat a second later. Sorry, sweetheart. Curveball on some stuff that came in today. Gotta work some overtime tonight, so I can't meet up. I'll text you about Friday night once I get a better handle on the situation here. Miss me a little? A small sting of disappointment pricked her heart, but Luna smiled nonetheless. She did not miss the tone of affection in the words he sent. That man was a charmer, and Luna knew well enough that even after 3 years, she was still completely under his spell. Sorry to hear. Good luck, and I always miss you. A message came back almost right away. Good girl. GTG. Text you later. She grinned like an idiot. Funny how he always provoked such a reaction from her with the smallest of gestures, the simplest of words. With a soft, happy sigh, she flipped to her other message. Lunch today? I want I want to sneak in some shopping. It was exactly the distraction she needed, though a small part of her wondered if she would regret the shopping part. Lainey had a notorious appetite for shoes and boundless energy when it came to fashion, but they would only have the lunch hour to shop, so how bad could it be? She glanced at the clock on her computer. How can it be almost noon already? She typed a quick response back. Sounds good. Meet at the usual in 15? Another buzz. See you there. She locked up. Oh, that's a dominant female, isn't it? I should have a more dominant female voice. Let's try this. See you there. She locked up her computer and pushed her chair back. There was nothing that couldn't wait until she returned from lunch. She grabbed her jacket from the back of the door and left the office, a renewed bounce in her steps. Luna navigated the maze of cubicles, down the escalator, and out into the early spring sun. She squinted as she adjusted the brilliant light, then turned her face upward to bask in the warmth of it. Being pent up in the office most days gave her little opportunity to enjoy the improving weather. She drew in a breath of fresh air and made her way to the nearby cafe where she and Lainey often met for lunch. It was a cozy place with soup, sandwiches, and the usual array of beverages, but it was the pastries they served that kept her and Lainey coming back again and again. As she pushed through the door, she inhaled to savor the rich scent of butter that made her salivate and her stomach growl in anticipation. Rolls of croissants, cinnamon buns, and other various confections in wicker baskets served as a backdrop to the front counter, where staff bustled to serve the growing number of patrons. Oh gosh, this is that a fresh tray of apple turnovers? The place was busier than usual, and Luna scanned for either an empty table or a sign of her friend. Relief released the tension in her face when she caught sight of her. With a mass of curly, fiery red hair paired with a perfect complexion, and a body that curved in all the right places, Lainey was hard to miss. I like the high voice for this one better, though. Lainey was hard to miss, even standing at 5'3". Luna was half convinced that Merida from the movie Brave was based on her. Next to Lainey, Luna almost felt colorless and shapeless with her pale hair and skin and more waif like body. Yet, if anything, it was that something about her friend's presence, a mix of charisma and confidence, that attracted most of the submissives and even half the dominants to her, regardless of their gender. When Lainey waved to Luna, she could see at least one or two disappointed faces at the surrounding tables. Oh, by the way, if you guys are missing Miss Ori Nina Ori, whatever you guys want to say, she is on the road right now, so say a small prayer for her that she stays safe. She's heading back to her mama's, so she got to spend the holidays with her mama. It's the first time she'd been to her mama since last the holidays, so say a prayer for her that she be safe. I just want to let you guys know because she would have been all over that first scene. And when I was thinking female dominant, I was kind of thinking of Miss Pebbles there and how Nina would be going crazy. Okay. When Lainey waved to Luna, she could see at least one or two disappointed faces at the surrounding tables. Somehow, Luna doubted that Lainey was obvious to the attention, but she simply ignored it. After all, it was part of her business as a counselor to read and observe people, but she knew her friend had little interest in others for now. Still in mourning for a love lost close to 3 years before, Lainey had never taken on a serious partner since. But one day she would heal. Luna was certain of it. With a small chuckle under her breath, Luna waved back, matching her friend's enthusiasm, then lined up to order her own lunch. She retrieved her bowl of broccoli cheddar soup, coupled with a half chicken salad sandwich, threaded her way around, and eased into the chair Lainey had reserved for her. Oh, thank God. Luna relaxed into the chair and dug into her food. Lainey had already eaten most of her salad and was sipping her tea. Poor thing, beastly day. Lainey leaned forward, her voice soft in sympathy, but she enunciated each word beautifully, and Luna had no trouble picking them up over the cafe's dim. Just work, Luna shook her head, and I didn't really get much sleep last night. A peal of laughter made Luna redden and regret her last words. Of course, as if the dear boy would let his pet do something as simple as sleep in his presence. Mischief sparkled in Lainey's eyes. Luna covered her face with a groan. We did sleep eventually. The words came out as a mumble, and Luna jammed more of her sandwich into her mouth so she would put her other foot in, so she wouldn't put her other foot in it too. A silence settled as Luna ate. She could feel Lainey's eyes on her and gulped down the last few bites of her lunch. The proverbial elephant in the room grew larger, and every conversation they had, the handful of times Lainey had tried to bring up the topic, Luna had managed to avoid it by changing the conversation. Still, it was only a matter of time before she would have to face the music, given how persistent Lainey was. Might as well be now. Before you ask, we're about a month and a half away. Luna pushed her empty plate and bowl aside. She left the apple turnover in its paper bag next to her elbow. Have you guys talked about it? Lainey's voice was kind, her warm hazel eyes filled with compassion. No, and I'm not sure how to bring it up. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like I want things to end. And since he hasn't brought it up, she trailed off as she realized just how pathetic she sounded. Except as a trainer, he never keeps a sub for more than 3 years. And that's the end date of your contract, too. Her tone held all the care and concern Lainey had for them both, but the statement still stung. Luna winced. They were words that had been sitting like stones in the pit of her stomach for weeks, but she had tried her best to not give them shape. Lainey reached her hand out to cover Luna's on the table. Well, Has there been any other Dom who has caught your eye? Maybe at the playgrounds? Jacob never just abandons his pets, you know. A shudder threatened to pass through Luna at Laney's questions, but she clamped down on the reaction. When Laney looked at her with worry tugging the corner of her lips downward, she shook her head. It was in the past, and it was a past she has she never wanted to discuss with anyone in her life. The last person, the only person she'd ever spoken with about her past, was now dead. No, not really. Luna was proud that she could keep her voice steady. Lainey sighed in return and squeezed her hand. Talk to him, sweetie. Luna looked up and nodded with a weak smile. Okay. She made no promises and was thankful that Lainey didn't try to extract one from her. So she straightened and strengthened her smile, but besides that, tell me, where are we going for shopping? Oh, I know Nina would love this. All right. I'm going to start chapter 3. I won't finish chapter 3 unless it just gets really, really good. I can move this book up. I'm missing stuff. So, because I got 10 minutes and this is a good book. We need to read some more, right? Okay. Chapter 3. Luna studied the girl in the full-length mirror with a critical eye. Silver hair piled on top of her head in a loose bun with tendrils escaping framed a pixie face with features a little too sharp for her liking. A red corset covered with black lace wrapped around her upper body and pushed her modest-sized breasts up to appear fuller than they were in reality. Below, layers of black fabric trimmed with red edges flared out at the hip as the skirt she wore ended well above the knees, while the back trailed down longer. Sheer black stockings encased exposed legs and modest black stilettos completed the classic cabaret outfit. It was a new one that Lainey had helped her design, and she shifted her weight from foot to foot, trying to find a more flattering angle. Confidence, she muttered to herself and straightened. The sound of a toilet flushing startled her. She blushed as a woman emerged from one stall and went over to wash her hands. Their eyes met for a brief moment in their reflections, and the woman gave her a smile. Hun, you look great. Luna smiled back. Thank you. In truth, that was the one thing she loved about the community, although it had taken a while for her to discover it. For the most part, they spent more time building each other up rather than tearing each other down, and people were so much more willing to embrace their bodies, no matter their size or shape or their sexuality. See, I need to be in that community because I got all kinds of stuff going on. The woman gave another nod and left. Luna took a breath, shallower than she liked, given the restrictions of the corset, then stepped out of the washroom. The Playgrounds was a local fetish club that took up all 3 stories of the building. Situated in the industrial part of town, the club itself was inconspicuous on the outside, giving little indication of the kind of establishment it truly was. Luna's gaze traveled across the space. Jacob had said to meet at 9, but she'd always liked to arrive early, just in case. The lounge was already half full of available subs looking for partners for the night or beyond, while fewer tourists than usual milled around. The dance floor, in contrast, was still empty, but the DJ of the night was just setting up. Later, the lights would dim and strobe lights would flash across the dance floor as house music would pulse in the air. For now, conversations and laughter generated most of the ambient noise. As no one she knew was in sight, she made her way to the bar. A larger group of men and women sat on one end, but she chose the emptier side. Careful with her skirt, she pushed herself up on the plump red cushions of a bar stool. Everything about the Playgrounds had that kind of understated elegance. Hey, Luna, Daryl flashed her a smile and gave a slight nod, but he returned the task at hand quick enough, busy with with concocting fancy drinks. Hey, hey, she replied with a slight smile. She liked Daryl. The man took up much of the space behind the bar, and the scar above his eye made him appear intimidating to many. But his easygoingness always made Luna feel safe rather than scared, even if the man was a sadist. They had first met at Laney's birthday party, and ever since, Daryl seemed to have made it his business to watch over her. Can I get you something? Just water, please. I know you're super busy, though, so please, just when you have time. Daryl flashed her another grin and a brief nod before he moved away to the other side of the bar to serve the cocktails he'd finished making. Hold on, I'm trying to see who said this because it's kind of a mystery, and I want to make sure I get the gender right. Silver Doll. Everything in Luna tensed and her body pounded in her ears. There were only a few people who would call her by that name, and she knew exactly who it was. She pressed one hand against her chest as if that would help slow her fast beating heart and swallowed once, then again to find her voice. With deliberate movement to buy herself her time. With deliberate movement to buy herself time to brace herself, Luna turned around. And I'm going to screw this up. Mephisto? Brian? There he was, blond and blue-eyed. At 6'1", he was innocence and bad boy wrapped in one, dressed in a crisp, tailored white shirt and slim slacks. He looked like a model who had stepped out of a magazine. There was a certain charisma to him and a magnetism that promised fun with a tinge of wickedness. Brian's eyes hardened for a moment, so brief that Luna wasn't sure if it was just her imagination. A hint of a smirk, however, lurked in the corners of his mouth, and he made a tisk sound. What happened to Sir? I trained you better than that. Luna swallowed and shrank a little in her seat. A part of her felt ridiculous in the outfit in the presence of someone so smartly dressed. Sorry, sir. When they first started their relationship as Dom submissive, Luna had asked Jacob what he wanted her to call him. Jacob had replied with that crooked grin of his that when she did scream in pleasure, he wanted it to be his name. Brian, her first, contrasted against her current Dom in more than one way. Good girl. Brian laid a hand on top of her head and Luna froze, afraid to move as he stroked her hair. Every fiber in her screamed how wrong it was, but her body refused to move. It took all her willpower to keep from hyperventilating. Relax, doll, relax. His words were near hypnotic, and she blinked for a moment. She remembered that about him. They had only met a handful of times in real life, but she remembered the voice well enough. Unlike those many years back, though, her body refused to obey. She caught a whiff of his cologne and struggled to hide a cough as he leaned forward. He trailed his hand down her neck to the simple strip of black silk there, the only sign of ownership Jacob ever required her to wear at the playgrounds. He was quiet, his eyes calculating as he stroked her neck through the silk, and she shivered at the touch, goosebumps rising on her skin. Part of it was familiar, but another part screamed inwardly at the violation. Her skin crawled as Brian leaned forward to whisper in her ear. It seems my pet did not wait as I expected her to. Fear twisted in her gut, but it was the rage that unfroze her body at last. She slid off her seat and took a step back to create the much needed space. I am not yours. Luna forced each word out through gritted teeth, bolstered by her anger. No, she's mine. Someone wrapped an arm across her chest and pulled her back with gentle pressure. The familiar voice caressed her neck and erased the earlier unwelcoming touch. Even as it eased her fear, Luna leaned back and relaxed into the embrace as she reached up to lay a hand on his arm. Jacob. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Daryl move to their side of the bar, observing in silence and clearly ready to help his friend. Brian paused for a moment, then smiled while he held up his hands. My apologies. Of course, he was all charm once again. Luna and I go way back, and it was a surprise, and it was a surprise to see her. That's all. He held out a hand to Jacob. Brian Walsh. Luna tilted her head back to look at Jacob. His gaze never left Brian, and he shook against her, his muscles vibrating with rage. She heard Daryl clear his throat and snuck a peek in his direction. The bartender's eyebrow raised in surprise, probably at Jacob's reaction, and she concurred. The last thing her Dom was ever known for was possessiveness. It terrified a part of her. Another part grew wet with arousal. Lovelies! Lainey strode over in her impossible heels. Luna was pretty sure that Lainey never wore the same pair twice. Dressed in a black pair of dress pants coupled with a golden cincher and a matching top hat, Lainey exuded easy command and control. Oh, don't you look wonderful, Luna? I told you that would do the outfit justice. I told you that you would do the outfit justice. Don't you think so, Jacob? Lainey's casual attempt at conversation worked to slice through the tension, and Luna felt Jacob loosen his hold on her just a little. Before either Luna or Jacob could reply, however, Lainey spun around to her to turn her attention to Brian. Oh, do we have a newcomer? Lainey turned without waiting for an answer from Jacob. Brian bowed toward Lainey, his gesture gentlemanly rather than submissive. Brian Walsh. I just moved into town and thought I'd see what's around. Lainey patted Brian on the arm. Well then, my dear, why don't we leave these two lovebirds to their devices and let me show you? Luna did not miss the subtle nod her friend gave her. Lainey was her hero right now. She watched as Brian accepted Lainey's suggestion and offered her an arm. She wasn't sure who led who away, and she breathed a sigh of relief nonetheless. What the hell was that? Jacob released his arms, and she shivered at the sudden lack of warmth against her. The anger was back in his voice and caused her to turn around. While caution kept her tongue from running, when she didn't reply right away, he groaned in frustration and pushed his inky hair back. Fine. You will answer me in private. Without another word, he turned. She was left staring at his back, his oh so sexy back. Clad in a simple black shirt and black slacks, and he towered over almost everyone at 6'3". Where Brian was manicured and refined, an image that he purposely cultivated, Jacob's casual naturalness made him even more attractive. Luna could just make out the muscle definition beneath his shirt, his every movement speaking of strength. She remembered tracing those muscles with her fingers and tongue, remembered the power radiating from them as he surged above her. Those thoughts were most inappropriate at that moment, considering that the way he held himself right now radiated anger, and she shoved them away. Luna trailed after him, wondering just how much trouble she was in exactly. She missed him already and ached to reach out for his hand, but she knew instinctively that right now he would not welcome her touch. All she knew was that she'd better brace herself for the conversation to come, because somehow she knew it would be one of the hardest they would have since they started their relationship. Hello, Dame Shadow. Welcome to this crazy house. Alrighty, that into chapter 3. Boy, that was a short chapter compared to the rest. That worked out great. Okay, so I highly recommend you read the first book. And did you put down the information for both books so that they'll know? All right, the first book is The Words to Bond. That's part of the playground. And didn't I read Rules of Some Are the Knots That Hold? Or is that one to come? Ooh, Some Like It Haunted, The Fae Effect. Ooh, I haven't read that one either. You so good. All right, everybody. So, who's going out to get the book? I know Jackie done did. Vincey's probably already done it too. Nina will. Don't forget to leave reviews. Reviews sell books. So if we want to keep supporting our authors, we need to make sure we leave reviews. And I'm being a little bit slack on mine lately. I got to go back through and update on mine. So, I enjoyed this. I can't wait. I really need to finish the first book. These series books are killing me, y'all, because I'm not able to get around to everybody so much, but I can't just read one book of the series and not be able to read the rest. So, how many books are going to be in this series? Thank you, Dome. I appreciate that. At least 2 more. Okay. So what I'm learning, especially, and I normally do this, but I screwed up this weekend because I finished a series. I caught up on a series. Is that right, Jackie? And then I found out the next book out is in April. So I'm about to have a shitstorm here. And thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. And then and I hate doing that. So I try to wait till a series is done and then I read it all. That way I just go on a binge and I just read all of them. It keeps my anxiety down. Because right now I'm kind of anxious over that other book. So, and I have a feeling I'm in the middle of another one that I'm going to end up being pissed about when I get to the end and I don't have the next book. So, yes, I am very Southern. I am a Georgia girl, and I've tried I can kind of sort of take out most of the accent and do like a Midwestern accent, like a no accent kind of thing. But any other accents, you can forget it. I don't do those well at all, and it just turns out to be a comedy when I try. And don't even get me started on foreign accents, because those really get bad, don't they? Don't they, Fancy? But yeah, I really enjoy reading my Southern books so that I can do this, so I can just be myself and Southernize it. But yeah, I'm horrible. I'm a mountain girl, and it just a Chinglish. Is that Chinese and English? You're welcome, Miss Pebbles. Thank you for showing up today. I've missed you, sister. I really have. You're It's kind of like Nina and her Spanglish. Yeah. Her daughter and I talk a lot of Spanglish together. So I'm learning a lot. You're welcome, Jackie Poo. Um, I'm learning a lot of Spanish from Nina, but it's really turning more into Spanglish. So I get the Chinglish. Yep, I totally get it. Totally get it. All right, everybody. Let's get off from here. I got some editing to do. So, man, those birds. You guys should see them. Let's see if I can get. No, I can't. Oh, there they are. See all my birds out there, my empty feeders? They're driving me crazy. Driving me crazy. All right, I'll get off from here now. So, you guys have a wonderful day and go read something. Go read. We all need to read. It makes us smarter. Smarter. Oh, I see the hair now. It's itching. There we go. Cool. All righty. All righty. Have a good one. Happy reading.